Well, now that I've been given my dog training command, welcome to this edition of the FCM podcast, live from our brand new podcasting facility on 139th Street in Harlem. I am G Money, coming to you live. Right now in my building, we may be affected by the fact that someone has a serious case of glaucoma on my floor, if you know what I mean. And so if anything's incoherent, we can blame it on that. On the podcast, as always, GB, how you doing?
I'm good, and I don't know what you mean by that, but that's fine.
Jmaine, also on the podcast. Do you know what I mean by that?
I don't know what you mean by that, but I'm going to believe you.
It smells like a Pink Floyd concert on my floor. Is that more clear?
So some weed is being smoked.
Yes. Massive amounts of weed are being consumed.
I actually could use a little bit right now.
What is happening?
No, this is not my office. This is just my apartment.
That would be much better if it was your office, by the way.
It would be tremendous if it was your office.
I mean,
it should be completely
the two places I work are a university and a life insurance company. So I don't know which would be. I guess the university would make more sense if it smelled like weed.
And it helps your life, so life insurance should be okay.
And Decker is also on the line, I think, but maybe not. I don't know.
I think we got Mizzy in.
Mizzy is on the line. Mizzy, how you doing? Is too confused to talk, and that is just how I like my Mizzy. So let's move on to this edition of the draft. I want to get some thoughts on the draft overall. When people were describing this draft to me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense the way people were talking about it. I guess maybe I'm looking at it differently than a lot of people do. But Jmaine, what did you think of the quality of the draft overall?
Overall, I actually thought it was a weaker draft overall. Every draft gets hyped up. Like you see a couple guys, you're like, oh, that's a great draft. I don't think this draft holds any weight to drafts, like your best drafts of the 60s or whatever. With that being said, there was some talent out here, but I was hearing a lot about the depth is there. The draft, in my opinion, dropped out probably mid-second round, like some of the recent drafts. But I thought this was a pretty overrated draft overall.
GB, what are your thoughts?
I agree. There's a lot of interesting guys overall, but they all got taken very early. I think people draft more and more or better, more GMs draft better lately, and it makes it to where it's a shallow draft. And I was struggling with my comp A pick, so that's pretty much what it tells you how I feel about this.
Yeah, I was surprised to see so many people talk about the draft being good as well as the depth in the draft. This was one of those rare drafts for me where I thought both the top and the depth of the draft were both bad. If you look at the top of this draft, aside from one person who didn't go with the number one pick, there are very few people who I could envision going with the number one pick in this particular draft. The pitchers seemed a little more like you're just hoping for development as opposed to seeing the way that they're going to get built. The hitters on the hitting side of this, there were so few hitters that could play proper major league defense. And even the ones who looked like they were developing bats were all old. It didn't seem, and the draft really tailed off when people were taking guys with 72 peaks in the third and fourth round, just because they have relatively better builds than the people with the around 80 peaks. That's a sign that the draft tailed off pretty quickly in my mind. This was one of the worst drafts that I think we've covered, if not outright the worst draft I think we've covered. I see very few people with potential, with Hall of Fame potential in this draft, unless they just get absurd development beyond which it should be reasonably expected.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you never know with development because you could draft a shitty guy and he turns out well, or vice versa. That's mogul. But there weren't guys that just really popped to me. Like usually when I like start doing my list for for the draft, it's like I just start writing guys down that just like catch my eye. And I was really struggling after like the first 25 or so guys that I wrote down there. I was like in the 4th round at that point. I was like, this is not good. So it wasn't good for me. I don't know. Maynard, talk to me. I'm gonna go get a drink.
yeah. Give yourself a second. For me, and this might be why people maybe thought that the def was great in this draft. What I do, this is just my style. I will go to the vitals list, the clipboard, copy players to clipboard, and I'll paste them onto a Excel file. So, for instance, Sean Perkins was the number 1 player, but he shows up on column 2. So, anyway, after copying everyone out and I was highlighting good players, my last highlighted player was at pick 110. So you would think, oh, there's going to be good guys from pick 1 to pick 110. No, that wasn't the case this year. There was guys that I liked from pick 1 to 110, but there were only like 8 guys, so you compact that. And that's the reason why I dropped off round 2, because you saw a guy who was listed at prospect number 80 taken late first round, which was Mike McComas, actually. So that's exactly what happened this draft. And I think it fooled everyone that this was a draft with high def, but that wasn't the case. There was a lot of overrated talent here. And yeah, I agree that you didn't agree with GB. And I think you said it too, G. There wasn't that sure thing build that we saw. I guess you could say Sean Perkins, but we've seen that fail in the past.
And I don't even think he's the surest thing in the draft.
I would think he's the surest thing.
I mean, I would say probably Pearson, but that's in terms of whether or not what you're expecting from Pearson. It's also you tend to see those guys go high because it's just an infielder that's easy to imagine starting tends to go very high. But what is his particular ceiling? We know he's going to play great defense, and we'll get into that more later. But is he like? What's the best you can particularly expect from him in terms of where is he going to hit in the lineup on a really good team?
Yeah, I agree with that. You want to jump into
Jesus
picks down from top to bottom?
Sure.
First of all, GB, are you back with your drink? And if so,
I've listened for the last 10 seconds, and I agree. Like for the most part, like these guys are just they need to develop well. You can't just be like, this guy's going to be good, even if he hits a bump or two in development. Like every single guy from the first pick to the, whatever, needs to develop well because they're not sure things. And the first base, Sean Perkins, he has that sex. I mean, every vital looks good right now. He has 1 jump and he's major league ready. He might be right now on a shitty team. And I don't know. There's not a lot of guys that you can just project and say, hey, this guy's going to be a star. Right. Besides maybe Angel Viramontes. That's all I got.
Angel Viramontes.
Good pronunciation there. We will go to Jmaine for all future Latino names on this podcast.
No, the best of all time is a Canadian, Levesque. He's actually Levesque. That's from years ago.
This is why people hate East Coasters and Canadians, for that matter. Anyways.
Yes, the East Coast North, Canada. Let's start out by talking about the first pick to Los Angeles, Chris Logsdon. I can definitely see some wrinkles here, and this is probably one of the least exciting number 1 picks that I have seen in a long time. GB, what do you think of Logsdon, and what do you think he ends up?
All right, so Andy put out a little nugget. He thought that he looked like the starting pitcher for the Angels back when he drafted. Who was it? Jay Maynard that he come up to?
Oh, we're talking about Speedy Caminero?
Canamar. Yeah.
Canamar. That's right.
So I kind of get that because his endurance was like around this, and he has the control movement like build. I think he might have had 2 pitches too. I don't remember. But
Canamar had 3.
I don't know.
I remember that.
All right. Thanks, G. You make me like an asshole. But anyways, so his home run numbers looks good, but with his overall, it should look good with where he's at right now. I don't know. He looks like he could be a solid 2, a solid second starter for me. He doesn't have a ton of. Let's see, what's his birthday in October, but he doesn't have a ton of time to develop. But I mean, he could be a 2, I think, which in this draft isn't bad if he's a really good number 2. That's what I got.
Floor is mine. I'm not a fan. I was not a fan of him. At best, he could be your number on a really good team. He could be a number 3, number 4, but he doesn't have much time, and I don't think he's got the opening vitals that shoot out like, oh, this guy's going to be an ace. I'm trying to see. Did he have a jump at all? I'm trying to remember.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Let me just get back. So from what I totally disagree about this Speedy. Is that Canamar?
I think it's Canamar.
Okay, let's go with that. I'll go with Speedy.
There have been 2 Speedies in FCM history. There's been Canamar and Costello. I actually think he reminds me more of Costello than Canamar. Who Canamar looked a lot more exciting, and also went later in the draft than went like around the middle.
Anyone's gonna go later in the draft besides the number 1 pick, G.
Duh. Anyway,
well, he wasn't the number 1 pick, I guess is what I meant to say.
Okay.
From what I'm seeing with Logsdon, I'm seeing one of those all-around pitchers who will develop in control, power, and movement, but he does not have strikeout, a K rate that's going to get you 170 to 200. So you're not going to look at him as a high strikeout guy. His control is beneath his overall. So what are we looking at as max? 83 to 85, maybe tops. And on top of it, he doesn't have much time to develop. This guy's going to be MLB ready in like 2 to 3 seasons. So he has to hit his jumps now. And without knowing that, I want to say, did he jump? Whatever. We got to see his first jump to see where he's at because he doesn't have much time. Because his peak's at 93, but you're going to think it's going to dip to 89 to 90. This is not that sexy of a pick when I'm looking at a guy who has like 13 upside, 13 to 15 upside.
He could get a jump before October.
Yeah, he can. But if I had a number 1 overall pick, that is a huge question mark. I don't know what I'm getting at Chris Logsdon. If he was 60 overall, okay. But he's 77. This guy is going to be AAA ready. He's going to be ready to go in 2 to 3 years. I don't think I see ace potential, ace caliber here. And at best, I can get a good back-end starter. But I'm definitely down on Chris Logsdon. I would have taken someone else, honestly. He wasn't on my list for those reasons.
I would not have taken him number 1 overall. There's no doubt about that in my mind. He probably would have been on my list. He's one of the safer picks of the pitchers, and I think his potential as a mid-end starter if he adds that 3rd pitch. But the interesting part is I don't think that's the way Old Wiseman is going with this pick. He's been converted to closer, it looks like. His endurance is low, but I think – I guess we don't know that he's going to be converting because we haven't seen the sim yet, and I don't know what OWM is going to do, whether he's going to keep him as a starter or move him to reliever. As a reliever, there's probably a little bit more potential for him to be dominant, especially if that movement can get up by 90. But again, you always run into the problem with converted starting pitchers moving to reliever is that their endurance is relatively high, and that makes them a shaky pick at closer because Mogul tends to put them in 7th or 8th inning as opposed to just the 9th inning, which means that their stats tend to be a bit shaky. If he stays a starter, I can imagine him as like a solid-ish number 3. The fact that his health and endurance are relatively low at this point is probably an advantage for his development. So maybe you can get that control up to 85 and get that movement around 95 with like a decent enough power number. I don't see Canamar potential at all. Canamar's numbers were a lot more dominant when he was drafted, and his control was a lot better comparatively at that particular point. And I think that that's what made Canamar what he was. The fact that he was basically a 100 control, 100 movement for a lot of the time he was in that starting rotation. Plus 60 ground ball as opposed to 45. So really dominant if you have a very strong middle infield. At 21 years old, I mean, this is quote unquote probably the safe pick among the top pitchers because all of the top pitchers look like they could be boom or bust. I don't. If you were going to go with a safe pick, number one, comparatively like someone whose build is very clear, I would have gone with either Pearson or Perkins, not with Logson.
It's fair.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. I was gonna say I think the closest thing is due to the game. I don't think that's OWM's decision yet.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, he's not going to be a reliever.
It's an interesting move because he only has 2 pitches right now. So I can see the argument for moving him to reliever.
They always get a third pitch, though, G. They always get a third pitch.
I would say usually, but yeah, pretty frequently.
Look at your East Coast words. All right, let's go to number 2.
Usually.
I know, right? We don't use that here.
So we have a general consensus that Chris Logsdon was probably not your choice for number 1.
Not mine.
But do we like him? Do we like him? I think G does. GB, do you like him?
I think he's he's fine.
Okay.
He would be a D in like an average, like in terms of what I would rate the pick. He would be like a D if this were a typical draft that I would see. If a guy like that went number 1, probably considering how weak I think this draft is, he's closer to a C or a C plus.
I kind of like how we're giving out. Let's give out a grade. CC plus. I actually agree with that. I'll give it a CC plus.
I'll give it a C plus B minus.
God, more grading. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid when I was on break from school, but of course I end up grading things.
We should do it on a curve.
Yeah, I think we are already based on
letters.
We can move to Brandon Pearson, the second pick going to Florida. I mean, this guy is one of the typical like builds you see for like the second base, third base, great defense. And I think Hokie making this pick, assuming he is still on planet Earth, he's going for Ryan Travis. I think that's the hope when you take a guy like this, like someone who's going to have a ton of longevity, who's great defensively, who you can move to second and third based on who you have, and someone who's going to hit for really good contact, but is not going to have a ton of upside with the particular bat. So I think considering the draft, he's probably who I would have taken number 1 had I had the number 1 pick. So obviously I like it relatively at this point. You just have to know that there isn't a ton of upside by taking a guy like Pearson, that you're going to end up with a guy who's probably going to hit 6th or 7th for you, or maybe 2nd if you're willing to put a guy who doesn't draw a ton of walks there. But in terms of someone who's basically a sure thing to at least start for a while in the major leagues, he's probably the closest that you have. The 89 health probably hurts his development, but also that might be an advantage. That's fine sometimes with middle infielders where it's much harder to gain a particular platoon somewhere. So if you can start him fairly consistently at second base, which I think you can, he is going to be probably the best asset that this draft has. And hopefully he develops a little more power than it looks like he's going to. Like some of the home run numbers actually look pretty decent compared to his vital rating. So maybe he will like give you 15, 20 homers a season once he fully develops. If it goes well, this is probably the best pick of the draft.
The first guy I saw when I saw Brandon Pearson was Eric Lindsay. He's part of the Big Red Machine in the 60s. and part of the 70s, I guess, for the Reds. Actually, that's part of the hashtag picture theory, by the way. I'm just saying.
Yes, Ryan Travis did
Anyway.
have a different photo. Like
I'm-
I don't know how we can even compare the two.
No. I'm just saying. Just believe it. You don't have to argue. Anyway, I saw Eric Lindsay, who had a very successful career. I think a short career too. I believe he went to Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, and he didn't really last. He didn't really last as much. He didn't really last much longer. Maybe like to 32 or something like that, something young. But
Remember
not saying that
having more speed for some reason. I think he was either more speed or
I don't
power.
think he had more speed. I think he was at your average speed, but I think he did run a little bit. But he had elite defense, and he did play shortstop out of position too. He was also a third base, second base.
He was kind of a shortstop that it bugs you to have him at shortstop. At least me, because I had him for a few years. It bugged me.
Okay, so he's a little bit defensively. He has some negative defensive rating because he probably played out of position.
A little bit, yeah.
So yeah, I think Pearson, as G said, would be a solid hitter through and through. I guess one little question mark would be this low K rate and how that inflates his contact rating and whether that affects his overall numbers. But I could easily see this guy getting to 95 contact with some under the radar power, maybe to like 75 to 80 tops. But it looks like, given his college and high school numbers, he's going to put some over the fence, probably, 15 to 20, somewhere around there. I thought this was a great pick. Safe pick, I would say safe pick. You're not getting a Hall of Fame player, probably not. But you definitely have a guy who you could plug in batting second, maybe third. I don't know. He could drive in some runs, but also give you elite defense either at second base or third base. I guess shortstop too if you're desperate.
If you're getting a Hall of Fame player, it's someone in the Ryan Travis or Jorge Questel mode, where they're a Hall of Famer simply because they're a name and have a lot of longevity and can get to around 2,600 hits, but not really because you consider them one of the elite hitters for either second base or third base at that particular position.
So I'd rather swallow my own cum than draft this guy. Because he looks like, if you have the file open, he looks like who the hell is this guy? I think my second baseman, Hiroshi Minoru. He's going to be better, but same profile. And it just doesn't, it's good. Like, I like it because you know what? He's a solid player. He's going to play for you, for half a decade, maybe a decade or this or that. But he's not, like, if I'm number two, man, I want a difference maker. And I think this guy's just going to be a plug-and-play type of guy that's just going to be – it's like you're drafting a guard, number two. Like you're drafting Quentin Nelson, if anyone gets that, number two overall. So I don't think they have the same effect like on this type of mogul thing. I don't think it makes sense to me because those guys have a limited upside. And maybe he goes crazy and breaks the mold. But to me, he's just kind of one of those guys that's going to have great defense and is going to be like a 7 or 8 hitter.
Also, as a PSA, I am copying over a screenshot of Brand Pearson, Eric Lindsay, just to support my hashtag picture theory thing. So just take a look at it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I think the Minoru comparison is fair, except for one thing. I think he profiles a lot like Minoru, but in one important way, he doesn't. And that's the fact that if he gets to around 84, if he gets to like that 80s range, his contact's probably going to be closer to 90 than 83. And if you gave Minoru 90 contact instead of 83, all of a sudden you have a much better player, a significantly better player.
I don't know.
I think you do, because as opposed to a guy hitting with a 255 average, it's probably someone who's hitting closer to 270 or 275 and giving you those 15 home runs and a few steals here and there, which means, which is like a pretty significant difference in my mind. Like, that's an OPS. That's an OPS of around 750 as opposed to 680.
Is it significant enough Okay, so you would draft a player number 2 overall to have elite defense in the 750 OPS.
And playing second base, maybe. Yeah. I normally wouldn't say that, and I normally wouldn't be this high on this pick in a draft that I didn't think was weak. But in a draft I do think is weak, and there are very few sure things, he's probably one of them. And I think that pushes him up the draft board comparatively. If you had a starter who looked like they were going to profile as a number 1, if you had a Sean Perkins, but who didn't have the huge health and was 17 as opposed to 20, then I wouldn't be as high on this pick. But I think, considering the context of this draft, this is probably a very smart risk in the sense that it isn't one.
I'm with you 100%. I think you've gotten yourself a good third baseman or a good second baseman for a good 10 years, and he is probably the surest thing in this draft. You know what you're getting out of Brandon Pearson. And I know you're not getting an MVP player, but you got yourself a core player, and that's fine in this week draft. Totally cool. Sorry they have to swallow your own cum.
Totally cool.
It's definitely in New York or East Coast thing. I don't know. I don't know.
All right, G. Number 3. We need to jump this fucking shit up a little bit.
We do.
So we're gonna put some ants in our pants for this.
We're gonna have to.
That's not good either.
No.
Sean Perkins.
I'm pretty sure it's called crabs. Sean Perkins. Sean Perkins reminds me a lot of I forget his first name, but McGee. He played like first base for Boston for a little while, and the Brewers. Yeah.
Jmaine era.
Right. Very. I would say. I was really down on him when he came in because of the low strikeout rate, so I didn't think he'd hit for as good contact as he did. But good defense, solid power, and I kind of like Perkins. I think I really like the fact that those home run totals are so consistently high. I like that rock solid defense. I don't think he's going to be an incredible player. And in the same way that McGee probably disappointed a little bit with his production, but was relatively solid, I think Perkins' production is going to be maybe a little disappointing, but relatively solid. I do like that he does appear to walk at a pretty good clip for a player that strikes out that little. Like if you look at those walk totals, those are pretty good. Normally you see something more along walk totals go a little lower with a strikeout total that low. But I think he could be pretty good. Maybe not an excellent first baseman, but a very good first baseman. Probably one of the better hitters this draft is going to produce. And I would say a pretty solid pick at third.
I'm avoiding this guy at all costs. I'm avoiding Sean Perkins. Nope. I see too many red flags. Nope. The low Ks. I am, and I actually have a maybe not a theory. I'm a little bit afraid of the high defensive first baseman because I've seen them fail a ton of times. I believe Nixon was one, Grimes was one. There's someone else I'm missing. I forgot his name. It was like 59 draft or something like that. But anyway, first baseman that has the perfect defensive rating and seemingly has an offensive build that you could see like freaking Barry Bonds 2.0, and somehow they just don't pan out. There's something about Sean Perkins I don't like, and I think the Ks are a clear indicator that maybe this guy won't develop offensively as you may think he will be. I don't know what the fuck I just said, but anyway, I think this guy's a prime candidate to bust. I think he's a prime candidate. I would avoid him.
So, G baby. So I know you're hip on this kind of thing. The overall compared to their stats, their amateur stats. So would you say that his walk rate would be a little bit inflated because of his 80 overall?
That's a strong possibility. Yes. So that should be a good caveat when I say that his walk rate looks good. It should look good considering how strong it is. So just to go over this for people who haven't heard us like talk about this before, when it comes to amateur stats, they can tell you useful things, but you need to take into account what their overall was when they were developing that stats. So a guy who was like 70 in a guy who was like 70 to 75 in high school is going to tear things up, even if his build isn't particularly good. And a guy who's 55, even if that build is strong for a 55 overall, our stats are going to look relatively weak. So just something to keep in mind, that maybe that walk rate is a bit of an illusion, which I think is what you're getting at, GB.
All right, so I hate this build too because it looks awesome and it never turns out well. And I know everyone's going to say, the right field build that has the power and the defense, same thing. And then, what was it, Resendez for the Padres? He's turned out well so far. So you can have those aberrations from that build. But every first baseman, man, from this, I mean, who's the Royals first baseman? Leon Grimes or something for
Grimes. Yep.
Yeah, for the Royals, same kind of build.
Looked awesome.
Do what?
I say he looked awesome.
He looked awesome. Yeah, they all look awesome. And I mean, if I was like first starting out in drafting, I would have taken this guy as quick as I could because it just looks like the projection would be amazing. But they just for some reason don't turn out to where you would project them to turn out. They're going to be good and solid in that whole thing, and that's not a bad thing. But I think there's more upside if you're drafting high, and if you're drafting high and not trading back or trading up to draft high, I feel like you need a little more upside for that, especially because if are you going to be good in 2 years, 3 years? I don't know. So that's my deal with Perkins. He doesn't fancy me.
Guy's a tease.
Cock tease.
Ben Carney. What do we think, boys? Second baseman, third baseman, Colorado. I personally love him. I actually think if I had the number 1 overall pick, I'm picking this guy. I love Ben Carney. I think he's got the power. He's got the great defense. He plays second base. He's got the upside. There's a lot to love with Ben Carney. Yes, you have to see him develop. Sure. He's not Brandon Pearson. You don't really he's not like a sure thing, but I've seen this build before. There's Philip Warner in Chicago. There's Leon Morin in Los Angeles Dodgers. There's Bruce Lindell in Washington. And that's not the reason why you should pick him. I just think that if you're going to get an all-star caliber third baseman who can play, who'd be a two-way player, Ben Carney's your man. But he could also fail. But considering this draft, I think is complete shit. Number 1 overall, I'm taking Ben Carney. You guys probably disagree, but whoever's up next, talk to me.
I said I disagreed. I already said who I would pick number 1. But,
that's right. Pearson.
So spoilers. I disagree a little bit, but I don't disagree that Ben Carney has quite a bit of potential. I probably would like him a lot less if there wasn't the general trending down in defense that you've seen in the drafts over the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years. It used to be that like elite defense was a little bit more elite than it is now, and some of those players wouldn't necessarily look like someone with 81 range wouldn't even be in consideration to play second base if we're talking about the way the file was in, let's say, 2050. But now, if the other 2 vitals are strong, you could probably consider that. Carney has quite a bit of potential. The one thing that would worry me is that eye looks like it's a combo of not striking out. Like, he doesn't look like he strikes out a ton and doesn't look like he draws a lot of walks. And with a low contact and being right-handed, I mean, 62 is not terrible. And if he gets up to a 93, I mean, there's really no issue here. He's going to be at least solid. But I don't know that I think he might be a different kind of not as productive as you think than Pearson, where he's just not drawing enough walks and his OBP is too low, even though he's hitting for solid power, as opposed to that he's hitting a ton of singles, but not necessarily like giving you much other than that. Carney looks like he could be he'd be a pretty exciting pick, and certainly would probably justifiably in the top 5 in this particular draft. I don't know that I trust him to develop all that much better than Pearson, even though Pearson has his flaws as well. I would say definitely a pick that I would probably give like, an A- or B+ to, without thinking too much about it. And I think you could put him in the conversation for the number one pick, but it's probably not the number one pick I would make.
So for me, he's third baseman all the way. He would never play second base for me, just for his vitals. To each their own. But he looks okay. I mean, he's going to be a good third baseman. Gonna have some power, and like third base in FCM is not great right now, I would say.
It's been great for a while.
Stop it, G. So yeah, he looks good. Like he looks like he's gonna be like a above average to good third baseman, which is not a bad thing. It's not like I just don't love the top of this draft. So he looks like he can be a guy that can start for you for a decade and hit a lot of home runs, or not a lot of home runs, but he's gonna hit you. Who do you get drafted by? Colorado? Yeah. So he's gonna hit you 30, 35 home runs for Colorado. Maybe.
And 25 everywhere else.
I was going to say probably 50 there and 30 everywhere else. But yeah,
oh, yeah.
I get your point.
That's not even by far the worst or the best home run park in FCM. But yeah, it's good. So I mean, I think it's okay. I don't know. I just don't love any of these first picks.
I loved it. Pancho Bonga.
Great name.
You really lost the magic touch when it came to pronouncing the Hispanic names. Like it was like Pancho Bonga.
You got too excited, I feel like. Just went over the top on it.
I couldn't wait.
Speaking of excited, if we talk about overall affecting like those amateur stats, if that's really true, those amateur stats have me super excited. The fact that the home runs are that relatively low, the fact that the ERAs are that low,
that's a boner right there.
Yes, that's a Pancho a boner, to put it mildly. His age, a good thing. 17 years old, has a lot of room to develop. But in the power maybe being an added benefit there. I mean, the issue is the endurance and health are both relatively probably a bit higher than you'd want for a guy with this kind of upside. I'd certainly, though, in a top of the pitching draft that was weak, it would probably be in my head. I'd be probably deciding between a Bunga as the top pitcher off my board or Jake Truesdale.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah. So I think this is a pretty solid pick here. I don't know that I like him better than any of the hitters that came immediately before him, but is he better than the pitcher that went after Verdecia? I think so. Is he better than Matt Clear? Yes, I also think that. Probably. And so if you absolutely need a pitcher, in that top 5, he's probably the only one that I could envision that could potentially go there. So at 5th overall, it's fine. I think there are probably 2 better players on the board that I would have taken earlier. Both of them are hitters, but it's not a bad pick by any means.
All right, so I need to involve myself in this real quick. So this guy looks like a lesser Carlo Bungard, who G-Money hates. G-Money hates that guy. If you guys have been in this league for the last freaking 3 decades, I guess, G-Money hates Carlo Bungard. He was a great Tiger. We all love him. Look at his numbers. He looks like that to me. He looks like he's not going to be that, but he's going to be, something a little bit less than that. And maybe because the draft is so bad, he likes that. I don't know. It's intriguing, that whole thought process. For me, it is interesting because he does have good AMI stats, good home run rate for his age and his overall. Endurance and health they're borderline, but they're not like drawing a red flag for me right now. But But yeah, he's gonna need to be like a 92, 93 overall guy, or he's gonna be kind of, something that you're gonna have to trade to like Theo or something in like 3 years. So for
Or
me,
Theo.
Theo, you're getting better, and I love you, but just I don't know, that was fucked up. So yeah, so to me, he doesn't. I don't know. Like he's a big risk, and if he gets into the 90s, then yeah, he's gonna be a really good player.
I think I think all power builds are risk picks, and if they fall anything short of their full peak potential, unlike a ground ball guy, like if a ground ball guy falls under his peak potential, you could probably transition him to the bullpen. Not the case for power pitchers. They have to be perfect, basically. So yeah, I get that that's a huge risk, but I think there's a lot to like here. 17 years old, good amateur numbers considering his overall. I think that he has probably the high of Joe Prince Valley, who doesn't have the greatest of control, but he doesn't walk everyone. He doesn't give up a ton of homers. I mean, I guess the home run rate doesn't really compare, but he'll probably have over 90 movements somewhere. I think there's a lot to. I think he's the best pitcher to draft. He should have went number 2. And you could argue for number 1. If you wanted a guy who would be ready in like 6 to 7 seasons, I love this pick. I think Toronto's gonna have a hell of a pitcher by the end of it.
Just to clarify my hate on Bongard. I think that something that we overlook, especially when we're talking about draft, like drafting pitchers as opposed to like evaluating pitchers once they're at the major league level. You have way more information at the major league level and way more relevant information. So,
he said level, by the way.
Whatever. Let's say level. I think that there are a lot of pitchers. Let's say there's a number of pitchers that I've hated like throughout FCM. Jim Riley probably being one of the first ones, but Bongard being up on that list. I bet you that if I looked at Bongard as an amateur player, I would have really liked him. But it's once you get to the major league level and you can see that Bongard was consistently giving up way more home runs than he should, and that his numbers and his vitals didn't really match up, then you hate him. Like Jim Riley probably looked like a close to a sure thing when he was being drafted by Texas way back in probably the 2030s. For people who are familiar with him, once he gets to the major league level and is giving up 35 home runs a season despite having 90 vitals in every category, that's a sign. It's much harder to tell if you have a pitcher who's going to be a low or high home run guy because those numbers are way less reliable for that. You can read it a bit, but you don't always know. And so like, is there a possibility that you've got a Bongard on your hands with Pancho Abunga? Sure, especially considering their names sound oddly similar now that I say them right next to each other. A Bongard, but you don't know that until you draft the guy, and that's one of the really most difficult parts of drafting pitchers, when there's this really clear category, this really clear thing that makes pitchers good in this league, and that's not giving up a lot of home runs. But on draft day, you don't have a lot of reliable information to tell you whether or not that's going to be the case.
I agree, and we'll save this for another situation. Let's go to number 5? 6. Eli Vershisha.
Wow.
Jmaine, how do you feel about this case?
When I was looking at this player pre-draft, I struggled, how to project this guy. I wanted to avoid him I don't know. I don't think his control is going to be there. He'd definitely be a power pitcher, but I question how far the control will go. Also, you see the home run rates in college, but I kind of give that a pass since he was 50 overall in college. But with that being said, his high school numbers are pretty damn good. I want to avoid him because of the control. There's a lot of things to like about him with the power. His movement's going to develop a little okay. It's just the control. And that's the thing about power pitchers. He could be Tom Little. and that's a bad thing. That's a terrible thing. I don't know how the hell I don't know how the fuck he got to the Hall of Fame ballot. But anyway,
add Tom Little to the list of pitchers I've hated, like the Mount Rushmore of my least favorite pitchers in FCM.
I don't even know who that is, so there we go.
Anyway,
you're better off.
I'm just looking at one key number for Eli Verdecia, and that's control. If it dips under 80, this guy is going to be virtually unusable. And for that reason, I'm out.
Verdecia just strikes me as like a similar build to Abunga, but a little bit less control and 3 years older. So like I think the difference is pretty clear in that case. And I don't think this is an unreasonable pick by any means, but I would say this should have gone later. Like if you take that guy in a weak draft in the middle of the first round, I could probably talk myself into it, but not 6th overall. Sorry, Poldy. Is Poldy the manager of Philadelphia, or did I just accuse him of making the pick?
He is. That is Poldy for Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. I will just say this quickly. He was not on my list, which doesn't mean anything. But I'm not digging him either. That's pretty much it.
And when I say, he'd be unusable under 80, you see the difference between Abunga and Verdecia. Like that's like a minor difference, and that could be all it takes for me to say no on a guy, because I think Verdecia is going to dip right under that 80 threshold.
Well, for me, you know what? I'm trying. For the last like half decade, I've been trying to ride on like guys that have like 6 or 7, 8 control over their overall when they're younger, and it's really tough to do that because like as they get older, that really lessens as they progress. And Jmaine knows that as well. But 3 over their overall, that's tough, man. Especially with their overall compared to their peak. I mean, he's going to really have to progress well to be good.
But he has high upside, so you never know.
Yeah,
if he gets
that's
to 93.
The one thing he does have. Yeah,
but he has to hit 93. Anything less than that, it's like So I'm avoiding him. Matt Clear. Are we clear on Matt Clear?
All right, so Matt Clear, I'll start this and I'll be quick. I like him a lot. He was like, I had pick 10 and I liked him and I wanted to draft him. I just think and it's not even 4. I think he's going to be a really solid like 3, and that's what I wanted. And he just has good ground ball. He's going to have a couple good pitches. He's going to be ready in 3 years or so. He has his home run rate is interesting. Amy wise. I think it tends to go to where he's going to have a decent home run rate in the pros. Not going to be great, but decent to be a number 3 pitcher. I think his vitals are going to be pretty solid when he peaks out. So that's what I think, and I'm going to go.
Get yourself a drink. I like Matt Clear. I think like GB said, he'll just be a solid overall performer. Questions about his control, but it'll probably get to the 80, 85 range. Another good thing about him, and let's just say he fails, Matt Clear. He's a perfect candidate. He could have a very productive career in the bullpen. Not that that's what you want out of Matt Clear, but you kind of have that insurance that he could be usable. So I definitely see a nice MLB career for Matt Clear.
Yeah, that's the kind of I'm kind of had that feeling too. I probably like this pick a little bit less than you guys, just simply because of the control and because with his overall that high, I don't know to the extent that you can trust those home run numbers, but they certainly look like pretty good. The ground ball rate's good. There's 2 good pitches. The movement's fairly high. I have this nagging feeling that he's only really going to be a starter for a bit in the major leagues, and any sort of drop sends him almost straight to the bullpen to make him a setup man. Again, in a better draft, this is the kind of person that I think would end up as like an auto pick or a late first round pick when you run out of like those guys in like the 85 range that have really great builds. But maybe not a terrible one in this particular draft. I mean, I'm surprised that GB, who took Truesdale, who I like quite a bit better, would have potentially taken Clear instead at that point. I think Truesdale is a much better risk overall, and I think has much more potential to be like a high end starter. He sounds like he's negotiating with his fridge right now. Not a fun negotiation either. So we'll move on to Nick Collars, a switch hitting first baseman going to Baltimore. I think this is a pretty good pick. Probably, if we're talking about my top 5, you can put Pearson, Perkins, Carney in there, and if you want to go with Carney, Collars, and the guy who went right after him, Viramontes, are like the higher risk picks in that particular range, but they certainly could be fairly solid ones. Collars looks like he has a lot of potential as a good all-around first baseman. The switch hitting helps. His power isn't going to be great, but it's at least going to be solid. And with first base, you can always find like someone on the other side of a first base platoon who has like 90 contact, 90 power against lefties. So you can keep this guy healthy and productive for you. He's 19 years old, so he has a lot of time to develop to potentially hit that 94 peak. If he does, he's going to be a very good hitter. I like the strikeout rate that I'm seeing, and I like the walk rate that I'm seeing from Collars. In terms of just hitting upside, he's probably one of the best options in this entire draft. And unlike Viramontes, who went directly behind him, who looks like he's going to be a pretty good leadoff hitter, Collars with those defensive vitals at first base is not a liability for you in the way that Viramontes' defense pretty much rules out him being a center fielder on all but really heavy ground ball teams. So Collars, I think, is a very good pick by Baltimore at this point. And I think something that someone that High Heat's going to be pleased with down the road.
Yeah, and this was an auto pick too. I guess he wasn't too pleased about that, but he got lucky.
I didn't realize that's auto pick of the year. This is like can we get the Donovan Pace award for best auto pick? I don't think he's going to end up as Donovan Pace.
Donovan Pace is an auto pick. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But for Nick Collars, he reminds me of Montez Robinson. He might be floating around the league still. He had great contact, decent, middle range power. I don't think Collins is going to have the contact that Montez had because I think he was at the 95 plus. But being a switch hitter, not a liability at first base, a lot to like. Yeah, he's not going to walk a lot, but I think his contact will help him get on. I think his contact will definitely show when you see his statistics year after year. He's going to have like maybe 30 walks. I don't know. But he might have 200 hits. But overall, great pick. I think he's there's a lot more to like with Collars than there is Sean Perkins because I don't see the red flags in Collars. GB, you around?
Yeah. So I fucking love Collars, man.
Wow.
I like him a lot. And I was gonna try to do a sneak attack with High Heat and trade him some guys that weren't great but kind of good, and to get Collars because he was I had pick 10 and I had 3 guys I really wanted in that pick and Collars was one of them, and I was interested a lot, and for an auto pick, I cannot be mad about that at all because, switch hitter, I think he's just going to be – actually, I have a dude on my team right now. What the hell is that guy's name? What the hell? Fcm.
We were still titling podcasts. The podcast title would be FCM Podcast number 80. What the hell is that guy's name?
Fcm. Seriously. They if Collars – progresses to his point, he'd be a Fcm. I feel like. I think they're very close in progression and how their builds are, and I think that's a really good pick, even if it's an auto pick. High Heat, I'm sorry that you got auto picked a great player, but yeah. So that's all I got on him.
Yeah, overall we all like it.
Yeah.
All right. Now there's my pick. It sucks.
He's pretty terrible.
All I know is if Mizzy made this pick, he would have given himself an A+. That's something I'm certain of. Viramontes is a really solid pick. Probably a pretty good value at that particular point. I was actually a little bit surprised he didn't go higher because you usually see the best speed guy just jump up the draft into the top 5. I think what was scaring people off was the defense. The fact that unlike a lot of guys with this particular build in the past, I don't really think Viramontes is that great of an option in center field. And in left field, you usually go with a guy who has a bit more power. But in terms of what he can be as a hitter, I think he can be a pretty solid hitter. I think one thing you need to watch out for with Viramontes that's going to tell you whether or not he's going to be a great player or simply a player is what happens when that birthday hits in July and how much that peak drops. The 86 overall peak is already not like particularly exciting. So if it drops if it drops severely to like an 81, 82, then we may not see the sort of development that you might expect from Viramontes. If it doesn't drop that much, then maybe you have a potential sleeper pick on your hands. And if you get to like sort of the top of the draft, he's going to end up as a very, very good leadoff type hitter who you know that you need to either DH every once in a while, or know that like you need like other strong defenders in the outfield to cover for him a little bit, or just go with an all ground ball pitching strategy. Never could really rule that out. But Viramontes was a pretty good value at this point, and I think a very solid pick overall. Jmaine, pat yourself on the back, get that back scratcher, and just go to town.
Oh yeah. So my idea about picking him, I knew that this wasn't the greatest draft, so with the 9th pick, I wanted to go with the best impact, and with the speed, I thought that maybe I could have a bona fide leadoff man, and that's basically why I picked him. Yes, he has defensive, deficiencies, whatever. You have to supplement with a good outfield around him, but he's probably gonna be a left fielder. I don't think the defense is going to drive me up a wall, but he's not going to throw at anyone. That's fine. He's going to have good range with the speed. But I wanted to go with the best impact because I knew that there probably wasn't much star power at this point of the draft, because it's pretty – like the elite guys at this point were probably leveled off after, I guess, Collars was picked. So that was my understanding of getting this sort of player.
All right. So I did not have him on my draft list just because – I'm really stingy on defense, and I probably shouldn't be. That probably hurts me. But I looked at him after Maynard drafted him, and he's interesting. He is. He's not going to be a center fielder. He's not going to be like your typical guy. But like with the righty the splits, I feel like if he does have a good progression, it could be really good for him. Like he's going to have to play left field. The one thing that messes with me a little bit here and there, and I don't know why this could be a non-thing, his decision making is 78, which if you have a stolen base team, a team that really wants to run, like that could really hinder you to where he's going to get out a lot on trying to steal. That might be nothing. I don't know. That's just my own theory. But he's interesting. I like him. I mean, it'd be really nice if he could jump between now and July 25th, even tonight. That'd be great. And then we would have a whole different thing going on for him. Anyways, oh God, Jake Truesdale, starting pitcher. Tigers drafted him. I have a lot of thoughts that aren't great on him. He's kind of a boomer bust pick for me. So you guys talk about him.
I'll start if you don't mind. I don't like him. Sorry. I have fear on picking players that are 50 or below overall that have a control less of 60. And Truesdale is one of those guys. I think it has everything to do with the type of pitcher you are and just build overall. I don't think his control is going to be there at the end of the day. and I'm looking at his walk rates. They're pretty high. So that's not. I mean, you can say 50 overall, but I think you can control your walk rate at any overall. I think he tops out at probably 75 control tops. And he could maybe convert to a bullpen piece, but I wanted to avoid this guy at all costs, Truesdale. But I guess I could be wrong. We'll see.
I think
Jimmy?
you're probably going to be wrong.
Okay.
So Truesdale, like, yes, 59 control isn't that great in a vacuum, but when you have 50 overall, and you peak out at 90, it's hard for me to envision unless his development just goes horribly wrong, that he ends up with a control of only 75. I think that's pretty unlikely, especially considering his endurance is pretty low and his health is only about average. I think his amateur stats look pretty good for someone who was only a 50 overall in high school. The walk rate's high, but it's not unreasonably high to the point where that would really raise a red flag for me. The only thing that raises a red flag for me in his build is the fact that his fastball is that low. Andy's talked about this on podcast past, where even if you don't have a very good fastball and you have better other pitches, Mogul tends to make you throw the fastball really often if it's listed as your first pitch. But he's only 17 years old. And again, I agree with GB that he's a pretty significant risk, but I don't think it's an unreasonable one. And he's probably, I don't know, the second best pitcher that I would have on my board in this draft, maybe third if I think he's worse than Lyle Reed, which I don't know that he is. So like Marfell's pretty good too. Like, but I don't know. Like, I think this, if you're swinging for the fences here when it comes to a pitching selection, this is a pretty good risk in my mind. I think he's going to end up as a non-dominant number 2 type starter if he ends up developing really well. And I think he could easily end up as like an overachieving back end starter, even if he doesn't get to that 90 peak rating. So I think this is a pretty reasonable selection by GB and probably the one I would have made based on who's on the board.
All right, so just my thoughts. Yeah, I agree. It is risky, and he has some red flags. And I would really love his control and endurance, or control and power, to be 2 or 3 points higher to make me feel better about it. And yeah, he's risky. I like that his endurance and health are a little bit less than what you would think. For the fastball, I agree, but it's kind of, I think it's kind of perceived differently. Like his 48 fastball at 48, that's terrible, right? His overall is 50. So I think if he does progress, I think it can be a good pitch for him. Not great, but good pitch for him. He's really going to need to jump between now and January. And he's also from New York, which I know you guys love. And he's 6'6". That's a tall dude. So let's just see how he does. It is risky, I agree, but I thought at this point in the draft that there was not a sure thing that you could do. Might as well swing for the fences on a starting pitcher. So, anyways, let's go to JP Carew, which I will talk about right now just to get over with my talking. I liked him. He did have a big jump to get to 7190, which is kind of scary. Because with big jumps sometimes come big drops. So it's interesting, but there's not a lot of good defensive outfielders that also have a good bat. So, I thought if worst came to worst, he could be a pick at 10 for me, or I'd trade out. But he has some good numbers. I like him a lot. I mean, he's going to be a dude that he's a safe pick. So he's going to be a guy that he's going to just be a good player for you for a while. He might not ever get to that point where he's going to be elite. Probably not going to be elite. But he's going to be a dude that's going to bounce around the league for a long time. So, anyways, Jay Maynard, what do you think?
I would rather see the drop than see the jump. I want to see how far he drops. That's a huge question mark on Carew. I think overall we're looking at a average to just generic outfielder who will have an MLB career, but someone you'll likely forget over the years. And Carew kind of just falls under he can hit 20 runs, but he's probably going to drive in 75 to 80 at his best. So but he has great defense. So I've seen an MLB player, but not for 11 overall. I don't like the pick.
I mean, I don't hate it. I don't hate it mostly because of the age. So I guess the age can give you a little more upside with the development. So let's say he's one of those guys that has a ridiculous development curve that just goes up exponentially. Then you've got something really special on your hands. Assuming that isn't the case, and he's going to peak out somewhere between 84 and 90, which I think is more reasonable based on what we're looking at here. He is, I would say, one of those comp B guys. He is going to be one of those outfielders that you like a little bit, but that you never really want to build around, and and he's going to jump from team to team every 2 to 3 years, and get like a $10 million 2-year contract. But I don't think he's ever going to be really an all-star. I don't really think he's going to be a guy who's going to hit above 6th or 7th on a championship team, unless he's one of those guys that just has exponential development. It's not a bad pick considering the circumstances, but I don't see him becoming anything particularly special.
Marfell.
let me say this. Let me do this so I can go get a drink. Marfell, I freaking love him, man. He would have been my first pick, or my pick at 10. A lot more than the dude I drafted. More years than not. He has everything you want to look for. You know, his endurance might be a little high. His health is fine. His control is really good compared to his overall. His power is fine with that. His movement is fine with that. Ground ball, great. 2 great pitches. Home run rate is just jumping. Like, it could be this or that, which is fine for an amateur guy. The thing that messes with me, and it could be completely not a thing at all. You know, like, we're all trying to figure out mogul, right? And it's confusing. Whenever I see a guy with a fastball that's a decent amount over his overall, it messes with me. Like, they don't turn out as I would think they would. And if this guy had his home run situation was like way less Emmy stats, I would have drafted him then. I would have. But they're average. They're like, you don't know what's going to happen. So, like, with his overall and his fastball, and I don't care about his other pitches, but that fastball being 10 points over his overall, it makes me, like, it questions to where I don't know if he's going to be – I feel like it's like a false goal thing going on. So, anyways, I'm going to go get a drink. You guys do your thing.
I can sort of see I can sort of see the same thing that GB is talking about here. Peter in the chat, it brought up the home run issues almost immediately at the time Fell was brought up. And I can see the problem, with the exception of that one high school season in 2079. He's giving up way more than the 1 home run per 9 innings that you want to see from guys. But there's also a lot to like. The control is a lot better than the overall. Even the movement's a lot better than the overall, which you don't see all that often with the high overall, high peak sort of pitchers. Great, but there's 2 things that I think are working. The pitch repertoire, I think, is pretty good too. The 2 things working against him are the fact that the home run rate isn't great, and the fact that usually when it comes to these sort of pitchers, I trust them much more to develop well, like these low overall, high peak pitchers, when they're 16 or 17 as opposed to 20. 20 is not necessarily a good age where you're going to expect a ton of development there. Now, if he were 17, I'd be willing to look past a lot of the issues, and he probably would have gone higher. But I honestly think I would have him. I had him on my board behind both Truesdale and Abunga. Now, it's not a bad pick this is probably like a solid B pick, a solid B minus pick. There's nothing definitively wrong with him, but it does seem like there might be a bit of fool's gold with this particular pick. Again, with a draft that's really weak on pitching at the top, this isn't a bad risk to take, though.
I don't think there's anything definitively good about Marfell. I'm looking at a 45 average ground ball pitcher, so he looks like your strikeout type pitcher, but he doesn't strike anyone out. So how are you going to get guys out? He's going to give up a lot of home runs. He's going to throw right down the middle with this fastball, and he's going to have problems with the long ball, and that's going to be his curse. His movements is going to be the key number in his development. If it dips under 90, he's fucked. He's going to give up a ton of homers, and he's just going to be a batting practice pitcher, basically.
I'm not worried about that necessarily because movement actually tends to outpace overall when it comes to growth for pitchers. And
right,
it's already
so
I think if he gets anywhere
his control
near
is so,
85
his control is so high that I question how high the movement rating could be. I have a feeling that this guy's gonna have like 93 to 95 control, but like 85 to 88, maybe 90. If he gets a 90, awesome. Anything less than that, the guy who reminds me of is the guy in Houston, and I don't like him for the same reason. Preston Franklin. He gives up a ton of homers, and he has a high ERA right now. He's on Houston. I fear that he's going to look like the attractive pitcher, but because his movement's not that high, he's a strikeout pitcher. He's trying to go for the K. He's just not going to get the strikeouts, so he's going to give up a ton of home runs. This guy's giving up 31. Now this year's 19. Marfell is slated to be the same exact dude, probably with less of a power rating too. So I think the key number, the key's vital to look at would be movement, and I think he'll fall short. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's over his overall, but I think that movement is going to lag with that because from the way I look at builds, whatever, I look at the ground ball percentage, and it determines in my book how a player will develop. Like I see those 35 to 45 ground ball guys to kind of develop an all around with control, power, movement. With the high ground ball guys, their power doesn't really move much, but their control movement shoots up, especially movement. So I see an all around development from Marfell, but if that's the case, it's not going to look good. He's going to have like 80 movement. It's not going to look good.
It's not an unreasonable comp, and TT was right to point that out. I'm not so certain that the development's going to go that way, but if it does, you're probably right that it ends up sort of stalling out. But
and there's another guy. There's
and I think the comment later that by Decker that CC Andrews, who we will get to later, who was your pick, around 24 is better, I don't think is the case. So I think this is probably the right part of maybe a little bit above the right part of the draft for someone like Fell to go. And I don't think that any of the pitchers taken after him, including the one that I took, are definitively better in any significant way.
And I was going to say before, another guy he could remind me of is Tony Norris. He went first overall a while back, but he also had struggles with the movement.
Put him on the Mount Rushmore pitchers I hate. I think I remember hated him too.
Well, prepare for Marfell to you know.
It's interesting. It turns out like there have been guys on the podcast that I've bashed and then ended up like employing later, and I was seriously against the Glenn Fawcett pick when that was made by Atlanta. And Glenn Fawcett ended up spending like 5 years on the Mets, putting up like 3 ERAs. So like I've been wrong before. My draft record is probably maybe above average if you're at best. And definitely I have a tendency to miss on the guys who end up really being transcendent, and I tend to be a bit too risk averse. So for a guy like Peter, who is much more focused on like getting the guys who are going to end up like as real all pros as opposed to just guys that are going to fit on the team. For him to say that he doesn't really like his development does raise a red flag for me. But as well as the fact that you say you're not going to like his development, Jmaine. But I still don't. I still think this is at least like a reasonable risk to take. And speaking of reasonable risks to take, Lyle Reed.
Love him.
I mean, I think that there's two issues with Lyle Reed. Are the home runs a problem? Maybe. And the fact that he's left-handed, which is always something that goes into your head. I think he probably goes a lot higher if he's not left-handed. His control also isn't super above his overall, which is what would scare me off. And he's not really going to be a strikeout pitcher, even though the strikeout amateur numbers look relatively good. But he is only 18 years old. The fastball's strong. The ground ball rate's pretty good. I think this could turn out pretty well for Boston. I think it might have been another auto pick, actually. But again, like the auto pick's killing it in this draft.
I love Lyle Reed. And this might sound a little bit backwards, but I think his control not being as high as Marfell might have 95 control. Lyle Reed will factor into the 80 to 85 control. That's where I project him. But this guy has the all-around build, as I was alluding to, with the 45 ground ball rate. So this guy's going to have a little bit of a strikeout total. And if you look at his numbers, even though it's not like the oh my God, because of the amateur stats, that's how he's going to be. No, like you're going to see how he does in the minor leagues and how he does in the majors, and boom, that's who he is. But you see a healthy K rate, 73 Ks in his age 18 season. I see a good strikeout pitcher here, and his movement has to get to the 90, but I am pretty confident that it will. There's just a lot to like. I don't see a single red flag besides the fact that he's left-handed. So he kind of has to be perfect. A guy I compare him to, and I don't think he's going to have a crazy Hall of Fame career or anything like that. But I think at this stage of the game, mid to late first round, I thought it was a great pick. And a guy I compare him to is Carolino in San Diego. I think 85 control, about 70 power, and a higher movement. And this guy can get yourself a 3.5, 3.6 ERA and be consistent across the board. No Cy Young votes, no nothing. Maybe an All-Star too. But I think that's exactly what Lyle Reed's going to do.
Who are we talking about? Lyle Reed?
And wait. TT says, I don't see how you love Reed and thinks control will play, but think Truesdale. It's because of the build. Truesdale's build is a ground ball cat. So it's his movement and his control that will develop high. But when you're a strikeout pitcher, all your vitals across the board will develop almost in unison, except for the movement. But that's why I like him more than Truesdale by a high margin, way higher margin.
I agree with TT on this. Like just the build, because Maynard, you and I had this little discussion,
Hello.
Privately, and it's just how you view builds, and and when they're so when they have such a small overall to their peak, you don't know. Like progression's gonna say one, but it's just interesting that's cool that we all have our own thoughts on things. Are we talking about Lyle Reed? I just got in here.
Yes.
All right.
You asked
how's your screwdriver?
Reed, and then we said yes, and then you asked us a minute later if we were talking about Lyle Reed.
Stop it.
He went for the doers.
Doers, Jesus Christ. I have a little blatants, but I'm not going to tip on those right now. Anyway, Reed. Yeah, I mean, he's interesting, man. I mean, he's a lefty. Scares you, right off the bat. But his endurance plus his health makes sense. Fastball's good. Slider good. His pitch repertoire should be pretty solid. Get the fuck out of here. Who's this guy? So it's interesting. He's 18 years old. I mean, his birthday is pretty soon, so that's gonna make a big difference. But it's not a bad pick. We should freaking pick 13. Let's go.
Robert Rush. Boom. What do you think? We've seen this build before.
All right, so I don't like it at all. I hate it.
I hate it. I hate it.
It's all good and all bad, and I hate it. So that's all I got.
We've seen his build before. We've all seen him underwhelm. I don't see Robert Rush flipping the script on this build. You'll see a fancy player at draft day, and then you'll realize that you've got a guy who will get to 72 to 75 contact with decent power. He'll run like hell, but he'll never get on base to show you that speed.
He's also going to be an 82-94. You should trade him at that point.
To where? He's trading to Cincinnati again?
Cincinnati or I don't know. Who are the fish?
Can Mescatix trade him to himself? Because that's what I would have predicted.
You should trade him to Seattle. That would be great.
Oh, sorry,
this
not
guy
thinking
is
of
just a
Mescatix. Like, talk about. I would say that talk about someone who's improved as a GM infinitely in the last 10 years. Even though he still has annoys the crap out of me in the chat, but much smarter at looking at what builds are here. I think he sort of got sucked into the age and the speed and just sort of went with it. But again, there's a ton of these guys who have failed across the league. Again, maybe less of a failure considering defense in general is trending down. So I don't hate this pick as much as I probably should. But again, it's a risk I would let someone else take, and it would be the starting shortstop I would be happy to have one of my division rivals have.
Yeah, well said. That's it. Boom.
All right, get to your pick.
Nate
Tompkins.
Tompkins.
What the hell was I doing?
So I'm going to talk right now about this because it feels very odd because G has a track record of drafting a certain profile or loving a certain profile or whatever, blah, blah, blah. This motherfucker has 94 endurance, 78 health, which is not great. His home run rate looks fucking terrible. He's a lefty. Fuck. He also has a 25% ground ball rate and a fastball 15 points over his overall. So it looks like G Money just either. Did you draft this pick yourself, G?
I did.
Okay, so I feel like you were held at gunpoint by somebody, or you threw up and just. Talk to me, Goose. Talk to me.
Okay.
Am I Goose in this situation? Am I Goose?
Talk to me, Goose.
Okay. This is I agree. This is un-G like. When I saw this, I thought this was like a mistake. When I looked back, I was like, he took me. I thought for sure you're gonna take the ground ball guy that you would love in your G Money style defense. Nate Tompkins is like everything you that embodies what you don't want.
Okay.
So I found it weird. But the player itself, I thought the endurance was a red flag, the high endurance. The health is where you want to be. He's going to be a crazy power pitcher. But I also question where his movement lies. But if he hits, this guy could be a scary cat. But I question if he hits at all. But he has to hit. He has to hit every single jump perfectly. Anything less of it, he's in Japan.
I think everyone was expecting me to take Feuerstein. I think that when you look at who was on the board, people were shocked at that. I think that's the pick everyone thought I would make. Honestly, Feuerstein sort of scared me off a little bit by not having particularly good control and having really high health in addition to having really high endurance. So I was worried about how he would develop. The three people on my board I was deciding between were Demetia, the outfielder who went immediately after, Adam Branwell, who went to San Diego, who sort of looks pretty similar to what I ended up with Tompkins, except younger, but a little bit younger, but also a little bit less exciting of a build. And then Tompkins. Now, I agree the home runs are probably an issue, but again, the overall is not that great, so I decided to just swing for the fences here. The control is relatively good for a power build for someone who's 19, for someone who's only a 59 overall. The fastball is very good. I agree that this is the pitcher I almost never end up with, and I'll probably end up trading him if he develops relatively well, and it will never pitch a day in Montreal. But do I think he has the potential to actually be a pretty good fly ball pitcher to people who experiment with those sorts of things? Yeah, I do. it's a risky pick, but I've been trying to get out of my own head when it comes to like taking safe picks all the time in the first round. I've ended up with a ton of guys like in the back end of the first round who just end up like as like basically functional starters. Basically functional starters. So I wanted to go for the fences, and this could have been a mistake, but if it hits, I think it'll go pretty well.
I respect that.
I think that his upside, which probably won't happen, but his upside is Albert Vilima from Washington. Like high upside could be a thing, but I mean that's a risk. So that's all I got.
Pedro is typing. He is offended.
Yeah, it's like what? Vilima never looked anything like that.
Pete can suck a dick.
Also, I think Tompkins has to develop more, has to get to the 35 ground ball threshold, because I don't think we've seen many people under 30 be successful. So,
all right, who the hell are we going to? Demisha.
I like Dimitra. I think he's a solid overall outfielder, switch hitter, good defense. He has a decent bat. He's not going to have crazy contact, and he might have decent power, but he's an underrated base runner. He's gonna steal some bases. He might be a 2020 player. He might be a solid 2020 player. That's it. That's all I got on him. I think he's gonna be a solid 2020.
I'll say something. This is gonna really make me mad if he blows up and just becomes a stud, because he has that profile, right? If he everything works well in like perfect situation progression, he's gonna be amazing. But he dropped at a certain point. Not great. Like I had him on my list initially as well. So like if he becomes that guy, like a 93 just complete stud, it's gonna like make my head explode, because what do you do at that point? Because I don't know. That's all I got.
I mean, Demisha is not that exciting. He's probably just the slightly better version of like JP Carew, in the sense that he's like the more exciting Comp B outfielder. But is a switch hitter instead of being a right-handed hitter, which makes him probably a little bit more valuable overall. One of the safest picks, I think, at this particular point, which is probably why I avoided picking him, but it's not as if I don't see what's to like here. I think he obviously has pretty solid defense, and like is going to hit for pretty decent power and steal more bases than you think. But I'm not going to say that this is going to be a guy that Andy's going to build around in Arizona. He's probably just going to be a guy more than anything else. He's probably going to be like an 86 overall outfielder. An 86 overall outfielder with a little more power upside than some of those others, but not really anything overly exciting.
On to the next.
Feuerstein.
Feuerstein.
Jesus.
Feuerstein. That is, I can't even comment on that.
Can I say it now? Feuerstein? All right.
That is not how you say that word. Oh, God.
All right. Fuck you guys. Okay.
Can I apologize?
Go.
Can I apologize in advance to the Anti-Defamation League before we continue this analysis?
Anyway, so endurance and health don't make me feel happy about him. 91-87. He does have a nice fastball. He has a nice repertoire. Jmaine, are you French?
No.
Okay. So he has a nice ground ball percentage. His home rate. So here's what makes me not put on my board at all, and that might be bullshit. His home run rate is a little obscene for me, and combined with his endurance and health being high, I did not do it. I didn't put it on my list. So go ahead.
What I saw in this guy, I think he's a good pitcher, but I don't know. I'm like on this guy. I think he looks like a guy on Chicago. Dustin Archer, who could have 1 or 2 good seasons in him. If he develops right, he could be a decent all-around pitcher with decent control, maybe 80, 85, I don't know. Power, he might strike out some guys, probably not. Movement, who knows? But he probably looks like a 4 or 5 starter. But I think it's a decent pick. Not in love with him, but I like him.
That sounds about right. Number like a 4 or 5 starter with like low 80s control and like 90 movement is probably what you end up with. It's fine. I thought about it, but I just didn't think. I thought the control was enough of a red flag, and the fact that the control was enough of a red flag with the endurance and the health that I was worried he wouldn't develop like I thought he would. But there are certainly things to like there: the ground ball rate, the good fastball. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being pretty productive, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we wonder, like 5 years from now, what we liked about him in the first place.
Sam O'Connell.
All right.
I love Sam O'Connell. Love him.
Gross. Continue.
I think this is gonna be bold. He's the second best pitcher in this draft board. He's the second best pitcher in this draft board. Everyone who passed on Sam O'Connell will regret passing on Sam O'Connell. I think he looks like the starter McAslin on Houston. Convert this guy to a starter ASAP. This guy's gonna be very productive. That's it. Yes, he's gonna convert him to a starting pitcher. He's gonna be just like James McAslin.
All right, so he's
gonna be awesome,
dude. His freaking junior year, where he had no.
Do it.
I mean, I was like boning over him the whole time. I was scouting him. It was amazing. And then his senior year, it wasn't that great. And then his freshman year in college, I was like, my boner's kind of down. Sophomore in college, junior in college, he's kind of old at this point. It's just my boner is like pointing down at this point. Like, all right, 55% with 2 pitches that are nice. That could be nice, right? He better progress. Because if he doesn't progress, he's a mid-starter, man. That's all he is. I see what you're saying with the 36 endurance. You could jump it.
To at least 70.
If that's the case, he's like a 4 or 5 at best. G money.
Okay, I'm baffled that anyone would want to convert this guy. He's only got 2 pitches. Neither of them are even better than his overall. His control's only at his overall. His power and movement are about there. And he's already 22 years old. I don't see the upside in him as a starter. If you can talk me into that he'll be a pretty okay reliever, I can see that. Maybe and I didn't see much really good relief pitching in this draft, so I could talk into it in that case. But man, I think you're just blinded by the amateur ERAs being as good as they are. I don't think there's a lot in terms of his profile that actually backs up those stats being that good, especially considering his overall is 69, which is pretty high for an amateur draft pick. I don't at 22 years old, I don't see the upside in developing him. If you look at his career skills chart, it's not as if his peak is going up exponentially that you think he can get into the 90 range. I think he's going to end up a setup man or a closer on a team that doesn't give a shit about relief pitching. I don't think that that's necessarily the worst thing in a file that doesn't have a lot of relief pitching, but there are definitely guys with way more upside available on the board at this point.
All right, Doug, help me out. Start this guy, and then 6 seasons from now, we're going to revisit this, and we're both going to be very happy on how this guy develops. Okay.
All right.
Let's move on.
Just the lovemaking there. All right. So we have James Lavery next. The only things that I like about him, besides I think he sucks, is he's a lefty. He has an interesting split that I like. I feel like he can be a solid to good left fielder to / DH at this point, to where that's about it. I mean, he's gonna have a birthday here in a few months. And 68 health helps, but I don't know. I would not pick this guy. I would pick the other Lavery over him.
G-Money and tell you.
TT actually said something that was sort of on my mind. He looks like the diet version of the right fielders that usually go in the top 5 of our drafts. But he's diet in a couple really important ways. The fact that his defense is not very good is a bit of a problem. I think he'll be pretty good against left-handed pitching. My issue would be that I wonder how good that contact actually is, considering he doesn't strike out a lot. If you look at that hit and run number, which is usually a good indication as to the relative strikeout rate of a player, 77 indicates that he's only going to strike out at probably a below average clip for a major league outfielder. I think like a pretty solid platoon guy. If he gets to 90, he's going to hit real well. But if he doesn't, then you sort of end up with someone who's just okay. I think he's going to end up probably as a DH and not an elite DH, but a pretty solid one if he ends up developing how he should.
Yeah, I think he's a generic DH. Nothing in his skill set jumps out at me. He doesn't have crazy power. He's not going to hit 300 every year, but he's going to walk a lot, which is probably his only plus. He doesn't own a glove. He's going to be a DH who will have a job in this league, but a guy who you don't see as a cleanup man. So you're going to want to improve on a DH slot. But that's it. He's just a generic player. Do I love the pick? No, but is he going to be good? I think he'd be all right. I think he could have done better here, though. Getting someone with better value.
Would you really take the other Lavery instead of him, GB?
Not at this point. No. But I wouldn't take that Lavery either. Who the fuck is Bramwell?
Bramwell.
Talk to me, Goose.
I thought actually I kind of want to drink a Goose Island. Anyway.
Overrated.
Bramwell's okay. He has a home run issue, but you can it's hard with this type of cat. He's 52 overall, so it's like, can you weigh his home runs with his? I don't know how to weigh it. He has a lot of upside. It's gonna be one of those cats like, let me see what he looks like at 60 overall to give it a better assessment. I kind of wish that if you wanted a power pitcher, I wish you'd gone with this kind of guy instead of the guy who needs to hit his jumps very quickly. But Bramwell, he could go either way. He's literally the classic example. He could go either way. My vote is that he's probably going to fall short of it, though.
Peter brings up a good point that Maddie and I usually go for very similar builds and pitchers, and we both sort of went with the high home run rate, swing for the fences, potentially great guy, instead of the more solid, less upsidey one. He could have gone with he could have gone with someone who had a much better ground ball rate. He could have gone with a CC Andrews. Instead, he swings for the fences with Adam Branwell. What scared me off a bit more was that the home run rate appeared to be even worse, and the power wasn't as good, and the control wasn't quite as comparatively good. He is younger, though, so I guess that's the advantage when you go with someone like Branwell, but he doesn't have that big fastball. The home run rate looks to be a problem. He's also left-handed, so I could see the case as to why you would take him over Tompkins, but I don't really see maybe, but I don't really see him being definitively all that much better.
All right, who the fuck is this guy? Bramwell. He's 17. He's a lefty. He looks like a dude that you're gonna take in the late first round as a flyer. His home runs suck. His repertoire looks pretty solid. That's it. That's all I got. And he's a guy that you hope produces or progresses, and that's it. What else is there from him? Talk to me.
Be a power pitcher.
Okay, well, what the fuck? It's all about like him progressing, or he's fucked.
I mean,
It's an upside. It's an upside pick, which is great, and it can happen. But that's all it is.
he can go either way.
All right, yeah. We just like the next pick that's fucking terrible too.
I actually like Wilkerson. I told you this. I think Wilkerson was a great get, man.
Hello,
Because he could be a solid third baseman. I don't look at him as a second baseman, though you could probably get away with it with a good, overall infield. But he's a third baseman, and I think he has a above average offensive game. He's not going to hit for a ton of power, but we're looking at the below average group crop of third baseman in the league. Wilkerson could be at the above average level, and that's a good thing.
Oh shit! I spilled my fucking drink. Dogs, get away.
Everything cool?
G-Money, talk.
Wilkerson, G-Money, what do you think?
He exists.
I feel like you like him.
I don't know. I'm just worried he's not going to hit. If he does, then you probably have something there. But I don't think he's going to be an elite defensive second baseman by any means. And at third base, I'd like to see a guy with a bit higher fielding rating and a bit more reps at third base, like as an amateur. His numbers there look all right, but they don't look like they're anything particularly great. Granted, his defense isn't awful.
Are we calling Peter right now? Should we all call Peter and make sure everything's okay?
I don't want to call. I don't want to call Peter.
No, Peter.
Oh, Peter. No, don't call them. They'll probably euthanize both the dog and Matt. Wilkerson again. This is just nothing too exciting about him except for his position. Not really a bad risk here. I don't know that I wouldn't have gone with Clemens though, where at least his defense is a lot better. And even though his health is bad, he's got solid speed. He's got great speed and solid contact. And I can see a much clearer path to the major leagues. Plus a much clearer path starting in the middle infield. Because I think even when Wilkerson fully develops, GB is going to get scared off about potentially starting him at second. And at third, even with a weak third base position overall, he's not going to be anything particularly special.
Fucking nice.
I just hope everything's okay over there. That's all I'm worried about. Moving on to Clemens here. I thought it was a decent pick. I don't know. There's something about him. I don't see the star potential that everyone else is seeing. I look at Alan Steele, the guy on, I think he's currently on Arizona. He's okay. He could be a good backup player, or at least backup quality player. But he's got good speed. He's got good defense. I would think his upside is going to be he doesn't have much upside, so his contact's not going to get to a point where he's going to be an all-star level player. I think he'll get to maybe low 80s type thing. But I mean, since this is a weak draft, why not go Clemens? Why not? I just wanted more upside. I just wanted more upside there. That's all.
There are some reasons. I actually just think he has some upside in development. I think his contact can develop pretty well. I think he's going to end up in that slog of 80s-ish second baseman and shortstops with really good speed, but not a ton of production otherwise. The big thing with him that worries me is the health. And normally 63 health doesn't bother me in a ton of cases, but those are the type of guys that you want to platoon in order to protect. And again, it's really hard to find a platoon for middle infielders where you're really getting because you need to find someone with elite defense, another person with elite defense who's really good on one particular side of the ball. Now, Clemens could end up a pretty solid starter, but I'm really worried he's going to end up only playing 100 or 110 games a season, and you're constantly going to be dealing with the fact that your pretty good shortstop is going to be injured out all the time. I don't think Pedro was comparing him to Chris Turmel. Turmel had a much, much better overall rating than than Clements is ever going to have. Termel at one point was like a 92 or a 93. Clements is never going to get to that point. Chris Clements. I think he's going to end up. I think he's really going to end up much more as like someone in that range of I don't know. Who is the shortstop that I just traded to you, Maine? Who is with my team?
Hamby. And I think that's his best. That's his high. That's his high.
That's a Tiger.
And that's a good high. And that's a good high. Hamby, Ryan Hamby.
Great player.
If you become Ryan Hamby, great. You have a pretty solid FCM player. But I don't think
played him at second base. He's not that good of a shortstop, as I found out the last 2 seasons.
That's correct. I would say Clements. Your high is Hamby. Your low is Allen Steele. So this guy Clements has to hit his jumps and hit his jumps very quickly, or else he's going to become Allen Steele. Allen Steele is just your basic bench player. But Hamby had a pretty good career.
Thank you.
GB, you all right?
Let's move on.
Okay. McComas.
The fact that I don't hear the dog barking is a red flag right now. I'm just throwing that.
They are outside.
Anyway,
right.
Mike McComas.
I won't take this one because I feel like fucking TT has become the young me. I don't like it. He has.
You know that TT is younger than you?
No, I'm saying he's in realms of the FCM.
Okay.
He's probably older than I am, or if he's not, I don't know. We can figure this one out.
TT, present your ID to the bartender immediately.
I will. Does he live in Colorado? We'll meet up next week. Regardless, McComas, I loved him. Like he was like the guy in 5 seasons ago I could pick in with pick 33. But we can't do that anymore because fuckface TT drafts these motherfuckers all the time. I mean, besides the overall, or not the overall, but the projection, he's perfect. He has a great build for it. So he's gonna have to jump and do the whole thing. I know how it works because I draft these guys. I used to draft these guys a lot. He better jump quickly. If he doesn't, he's gonna be an average pitcher. So that's about it. I love him. Fuck you, TT.
My idea of McComas, I think he's a good player. I question how much his power is going to develop. He's got a great fastball. That's a huge plus at 17 years old. So he's gonna have a pretty dominant fastball. I'm just curious to see how high that power is going to get. Hopefully, if he gets that early jump, to kick things off at 17, if he gets at 85, maybe I don't know, that'd be good. But there's a lot of positive things about Mike McComas, so it's a reach, but it's a good reach. Why not? This draft just fell on its face after this.
I've drafted guys like him before, and I think sometimes that you're getting someone better than you are. You have to accept that you're going to get that anything you get better than a solid number 4 starter is. We will never accept it. Is going to be a little too ambitious. As long as you know that there isn't a ton of upside with a guy like McComas, even if he unless he just completely runs away from that 81 rating and gets into the 90s, then you're good. Maybe there's some potential with that because he's as young as he is. Certainly not a bad player, a bad player or a bad risk. But I've taken these guys before, and they end up exciting you a lot less than you're expecting.
Ice, what the fuck are you doing on the floor?
Now Pedro is apparently jumped the line to comment on Dusty Snell. Dusty Snell only has 9 upside, which apparently equals fail in the first round. I just don't see a ton of upside with Dusty Snell, literally or figuratively. I think he's going to end up as a fine shortstop. I took a guy a lot like him who's starting for me right now named Ron Sully. Maybe Snell can end up a little bit better than that, but I have my doubts. And it's not who you want to take in the first round. Like those guys are pretty well. Those guys are relatively fungible in terms of
Fungible.
yes, you can always get another guy like that.
I know what it means, you fuckface.
I think this is a waste pick. You can find this guy in free agency at the league minimum. This guy has no upside. You have one shot.
The speed is upside. It's only 78, but he's going to steal.
I don't give a damn about his steal. If unless he steals 60 bags a year, I don't care that he's going to steal 5 to 7 times a year. Like this guy is just going to pick the ball clean at shortstop and then hit for a 200 average. Like it's a big waste. No,
I think he's going to steal closer to 25 bases than 5, but I agree. Not a ton of upside with this figure.
I think if there's any hope for Dusty Snell, and this is not really that good hope, he could be Jason Wood, who's currently on Houston. He has to hit a very early jump, and then he could have a decent career. But Jason Wood's not the best player in the world either. So that's not really, I think that's my only compliment.
I'd be very surprised.
But I'll be ecstatic if I'm OWM and I get Jason Wood. But you're probably going to get some average generic.
Hint to Texas Tornado. Jason Wood is not a shortstop. You need to move him to second base immediately. Immediately. Like right now. Like post that you're converting him right now before this drunken abomination of a podcast ends.
Okay, so CC Andrews, I know we all love him. I know I just got a Hall of Famer at 25 overall. But I don't want to get too crazy on CC Andrews. What do you guys think of CC Andrews?
Not that crazy.
All right, so I'll start this. He's a guy that I liked. He was on my list. He's interesting. He had the drop that's not terrible. Was it 4 or 3?
3. He was at 85.
3. So fuck off on that one.
It's not a downtrend. It's a B-Day drop, Pedro.
Yeah. So endurance and health is solid. It's fine. The fastball is a little scary for me because it's a little over his overall. Ground ball fast or ground ball 50%. Home run rate, great. Like I had him on my list. I wanted him 33 or whatever the fuck I picked. And he wasn't there because we got fucking TT and fucking Jmaine sucking each other's cocks and drafting these guys before me now. It makes me sad. Good pick. Solid pick because like the other guys after him, I mean, they're just like fucking shots in the dark, man. I mean, I like him. I like him. Good pick. Fuck off.
Yeah, I tried to go with the highest impact, so I thought CC Andrews had the best chance. Boom.
My concern with him is the fact that he's not trending upward in that chart, plus the fact that he's already 21 years old, in my mind, are two pretty big red flags when you combine them. If he were 18 or 19, I would say take him way, way higher than he went. And there's certainly a lot of things to like in terms of the control and the fastball and the relatively good home run rate and the fact that the power and movement are at least decent to the point where you can imagine him not just being a ground ball specialist, but actually getting a few like strikeouts here and there. Again, if he gets to that 82, like I don't know if you end up with much more than a pretty good number for a starter. It's not an unreasonable pick. But again, it's also a weak draft. So like having a guy with his tools seems pretty solid. If I thought that there was a chance he could get above 82 as a peak that was significantly high, then I would be much more excited about this.
Fair. Mike Dingman, one of our favorite names of the draft. Mike Dingman. I'll start.
He's not going to hit a lot of Dingmans, I can tell you that.
I think Mike Dingman is an average second baseman. There's no power. His contact will not be so high that he's going to hit like Robbie Cano. He doesn't have speed, but he will have a job because he has a glove. But I don't see him batting anything higher than 8th in the lineup. He had a huge jump, and maybe that's a positive, but I don't know if that's greatest positive thing because he's going to drop back down to earth to like 80 to 79, and then we're looking at someone who has one more jump remaining. So this guy doesn't have much upside. So overall, I thought this was probably an awful pick. I don't see much in Mike Dingman.
I mean, I see some of the same problems that I saw with Snell. I mean, I guess there's a little more upside in the technical sense, but I also don't think he's as good defensively as Snell is. I'm not as sure he's going to be an elite defensive. No, I take that back. Actually, never mind. They're both sort of like going to end up in the average to above average defensive category. I suppose I prefer this pick to Snell if you're going to take a middle infielder that doesn't have a ton of upside, but I don't think he has a ton of upside. And I don't really envision him hitting anything higher than 8th. He's a switch hitting decent second baseman. I've taken guys like this before. At this point, you tend to end up a little bit disappointed, but not the worst pick in the world.
I give a fuck about that, yeah.
Okay. Do you give a fuck about Seth Key?
I was interested in Seth Key, actually, yes. He was a dude that I was intrigued by. It was between him and whoever the hell I drafted before or after. I like Seth Key. Where the hell? Let me scroll down a little bit. Dogs. That's enough. Not Dingman. Jesus Christ. Seth Key, yeah. So he has some upside. 16 years old. He has 22 upside. His endurance to health is pretty solid. His pitch repertoire is pretty solid. Ground ball percentage is okay, I guess. Birthday is solid. It's intriguing. So home run rate, solid. So talk to me.
I like this pick. I kind of bunch up Key with McLaren, with Bramwell, these power pitchers who are very young, a lot of upside, and you just don't know if they're going to go, they could go either or, right? Maybe two out of these, 2 of the 3 guys could be good. I don't know. But the good thing I like about Seth Key, 1, he's 16, but 2, he's right-handed. For some reason, I am very afraid of picking a lefty. What could set Seth Key apart from these other guys who are just bunched with the fact that he's right-handed and he doesn't have that red flag, and he also doesn't give up a lot of home runs. So if this guy's going to hit, that's a good thing. So we'll see. But you won't see him until he's like 23 type guy. So we'll come back in 7, 8 years.
To not give up a lot of home runs and be only a 51 overall is a really, really good sign. The part that I'm concerned about is the fact that his control isn't that much over his overall and his movement isn't very good. And if he's only peaking out an 83, and let's say he gets there, the control and movement may not really be good enough for a major league rotation, and you may need to convert him into a bullpen guy, and that's tough with an 84 endurance. Now, this pick will look awesome if he develops well above an 83 peak. If he gets to 90, he could end up as one of the best pitchers in this entire draft. But if he ends up only in the low 80s, then I think he's going to be a serious disappointment. So this pick entirely depends on development. But what I see in terms of potential for the development is very, very good. So pretty smart risk at this point in the draft. I just wouldn't necessarily rely on him to be part of my future plans, but you can say that about a lot of guys who went in the mid to late first round in this part of the draft here. And
that's fair.
Among the Mizzy picks we saw, I would probably give this the best rating. But again, it could end up going a lot of different directions.
That's definitely fair. This guy can have an early jump and have the bar set at like 90. It could happen. The chances of happening is probably low, so you can't expect that. But at 16 years old, this is the type of risk that that's a good risk by Mizzy. You're taking it at 16, a lot of upside. He's got good numbers, good. Not the greatest build, but he's 16. Anything can happen. If he was 20, different. If he was 20 years old, then different story.
Yeah, like this is like a lottery ticket, but it's one of like the good scratch off tickets, like cash word.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of opportunities to win.
But like you just throw away the card if you lose. Like you just don't know.
Yeah.
Next guy, Tomas Arnado. I actually like this guy. And I know everyone's gonna say he doesn't throw out runners, but he could probably throw out a decent clip, probably below average. But I like his power potential. I'm surprised that he fell this far, to be honest with you. I thought someone was gonna grab him somewhere in the mid first. Definitely curious where his contact ends up.
Alive, thank God.
Yeah, thank God.
So,
I'm very happy about that. Arnado, what do you think?
I have some issues with him. I don't think he's going to hit righties well enough down the road. My other big problem is that it looks like that's mostly doubles power as opposed to legitimate home run power from Arnado. I think he ends up being a very highly rated platoon catcher down the road, especially without an elite arm or any other upside in the bat.
I know. I'm concerned too. Don't worry.
Jesus.
The concern is very high.
Yeah, bark twice if you need to. Bark twice if you need to.
We might need to call PETA. We might need to.
Who are we talking about?
We're talking about nothing. We're definitely not reporting a potential animal abuse case. We're definitely only talking about Thomas Arnado.
Oh, they're fine, man. They're like love dogs. Let me think.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I fucking love Thomas Arnado, man. I was thinking about him when I traded up to 21 or whatever. I love him. I thought it was a great pick, even if it was 2 picks. Good thing. That's all I got.
I think the value of this pick is is a factor for me too. Not everyone has good catching, so you could easily see this guy developing, and then he could be on the trade market and be attractive. It'd be different if he was like a first baseman or a corner outfielder. This guy's a catcher. Everyone needs a catcher, besides me. But Justin McLaren.
So I think he is fine. I think it's simple. I mean, he's playing on the upside here, and if he progresses well, perfectly, actually, it'll be good. If not, it'll be a shitty pick. That's all I got.
I bunched him with the Keys and the Bramwells. He go either way. What I don't like about him is that he's lefty, but he has high upside. He can go either way. That is going to be the key with these 51 overall 90 peak guys. Doesn't have a power fastball. It's good circle change, but I'll see you in 7 years, Justin McLaren. We'll see.
Dick punch.
I just think he's the less exciting version of if you made me guess as to which one of these guys is going to hit the major leagues, it's a tough call because Key profiles better, and if I were just looking at the vitals, I would say Key, but McLaren is already at the 90 peak, which is what you want to get to anyway. So
yes,
it's a really tough call. I think one of those can go either way. I think I might have taken Key, but you really could justify it because Key's profile doesn't looks better when it comes to home runs, looks better when it comes to pitch selection, looks better when it comes to not being left-handed. But McLaren also is already at the 90 peak you'd be searching for anyway. So I guess the picks would probably be about the same. Yeah.
I was going to say, I definitely have a little bit of hesitance of picking this type of guy, but there wouldn't be any shock for me if I see a guy like Justin McLaren become a solid 2 or 3 starter. I wouldn't be shocked if he becomes a solid 2. But I'm just personally, I am afraid of picking these type of guys because I don't want to waste a draft pick. And these guys are very, 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 very high ceilings, but the floor is just Japan. You know, you're going to play overseas.
No, you get forcibly exiled to Japan.
Yeah, you've been forcibly exiled to Japan. All right, and for the final pick, what do we think for the Cubbies?
It's not. I tend to like these catchers more than a lot of people do. Like the catchers that you can platoon with someone that don't necessarily have the greatest arm. But boy, is that arm bad. They're not stealing on him a ton, which is like in the amateur stats, which is part of the reason I take the risk. But geez, like a 9% career caught stealing in high school, give or take. Ugh. I think he's more like Missy was trying to make the Nat Thorne comparison earlier. I think this guy is closer to that if he ends up peaking out and getting to that 92. But a lot of guys are going to be too scared by that defense to play him at catcher. I might be one of the few who's willing to take the risk.
Yeah, it's going to come down to preference. If you want to play this guy will have a good bat. He won't have much power, but he'll definitely have good contact and good eye. Personally, I'll never play him, and I think Peter would never play him. Even though I think Peter's one of those guys who doesn't care about defensive ratings at catcher.
Oh, he does. He doesn't.
But,
he doesn't. Peter is a handling truther. He doesn't think that handling is a real rating, and I'm actually sort of inclined to agree with him. Mogul has had the same core gameplay since like 2000, and I get very suspicious whenever there's a rating that gets added later into the game that it has any real impact, considering not much about the core gameplay other than splits have legitimately changed the game throughout the course of about 20 years. So I'm not one of those people who thinks that handling is a big deal. I'd be afraid to start a guy who has like 55 handling and is one of those like utility players who also plays catcher for some reason. But if a guy's handling is at least in the 70s, I'm not going to freak out about it.
Well, this guy handling doesn't matter, but he certainly doesn't have the arm. So that's
okay.
That's a book on Hidalgo. That's the book. I think we've exhausted this first round.
We're about to close the book on this first round of the FCM podcast. We would like to apologize on behalf of the league for the drunken embarrassment that we have displayed here. I'd like to apologize to Vodka. Vodka deserves better than this. I still think GB is mostly just annoyed that he has to go back to work, which explains his poor attitude and surly demeanor.
Please press F to pay respects.
I mean, that does suck, man. That's fucked up.
It does. It
Plus,
is fucked
Nico
up.
Goodrum just struck out.
What the? I don't know what he just said, to be honest with you, but I think he said sorry.
There was a phrase there that definitely wasn't in English. Mizzy would like to recommend that you stick around for the non-drunk rest of the draft recap. I don't know why he can. A, the fact that it's non-drunk is somehow a benefit, and B, the fact that he can assure that he won't be drunk after this sim is over. Yeah, less slurring. I slur when I'm sober, so I don't know what difference that makes.
I think we should all have our super picks right now. Super picks. Super picks.
Is he talking about the Super Bowl or?
Nope. I'm talking about.
I'll do it for this edition of the FCM podcast. And this will end as soon as Poldy gives us the command to end the podcast.
Oh, I got it. Don't worry. I get it. Craig, I'll leave. So for now, see you next time. I really hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. This has been fun, though. I had fun. But hopefully GB's dogs are okay. And until next time. So I think Mizzy and TT will have their own version of the draft rating. So we will see when that happens. But for now, peace.